the Adventures in Awakening show. I'm Tracy Spring, and this is the epic exploration of the depths of who you really are and the highest purpose of why you're here. So come along with us on an adventure in awakening. Well, everyone, we have the most amazing guest today. Absolutely one of my favorite people in the whole world, Debra Poneman. Debra, thank you for joining us today on our program.
Thank you for inviting me. You know, I get invited a lot and I think, oh, do I really want to do this? You called me. I said, yes.
Oh, yay.
Because I love having conversations with you and I just love being with you, and whoever you bring into your orbit, I will love being with them as well.
Oh, bless you, Debra. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm just so excited about having this conversation with you today. And so let me just share a little bit about Debra before we get started. So Debra Poneman is a true pioneer in the world of transformation. She's one of the original teachers of New Thought concepts and has been teaching her Yes to Success seminars for more than 40 years. I know it's hard to believe looking at her. She's taught it to hundreds of thousands of people from around the world. And more recently, she has been offering an amazing new program called Ageless. Both of her programs are amazing. I've taken them both. I can just say they're just some of the most helpful awakening programs that I've ever taken. So I highly recommend them. In her powerful programs, she guides people to live not only from the highest level of success and abundance, but also from a deeper sense of happiness, profound self-love, and youthful radiance. And she is a living example of that, the youthful radiance. She's been called the mentor to the mentors because she has taught many of our great New Thought leaders of today, including Marcy Shimoff, Janet Atwood, and even Dr. Deepak Chopra. Debra is also a best-selling author, a gifted speaker, and a very awakened being. She started meditating and became a meditation instructor when she was very young. And this opened up the path for her to bring her enlightened vision to the world. I've had the great pleasure of knowing Debra for many years, and I consider her to be such a dear friend. And so, Debra, I'm just so grateful that you're here with us today. Yay.
Well, thank you. Yes, we have been friends for many, many decades.
Many, many decades.
We're still together.
I know, isn't that amazing? And you have done so many wonderful things over the years, so many things, and you never rest on your laurels. You're always coming up with something new. You did your Year of Miracles with Marcy Shimoff for 5 years, and then you came back to your Yes to Success programs and reinvented them, and then now have started a new program called Ageless. So you've been so busy with your wonderful programs. But today we're here to talk about awakening. And I thought I would start with a quote by Pierre de Chardin. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And what does that mean to you, Debra, when you hear that quote?
Well, I've heard it so many times, and that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And to me, it means exactly what it says. We are of this essence that is light, that is vibration, that is infinite. And by being humans, we have taken that infinity and squeezed it into these human bodies. And how blessed are we that we are in human bodies, because this human vehicle, we can use it as a way to awaken. I remember one of our very first spiritual teachers, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. We come from that same tradition.
Yes.
And his teacher, Gurudev, said that having a human body is a rare gift. And if you don't use it to become awakened, then you are trading the price of gold for a bag of spinach. And so basically what Gurudev was saying, Swami Brahmananda Saraswati, who was the Jagat Guru of Jyotirmath back in the 40s and 50s, what he's saying is that, guys, if you have a human body and you are aware that awakening is possible and you don't use that human body to become awakened, then price of spinach, bag of gold for the price of spinach.
I love that quote, one of my favorite quotes of all time. And
Yes.
we do both come from the same tradition, Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who brought transcendental meditation to the West. And I understand that you started meditation very early. Can you tell us a little bit about your transformational journey, your awakening journey?
Yes. Well, it's so interesting because I started meditating when I was 18, and then I became a teacher. I went to teacher training in 1971, which is interesting because I'm now 71. I don't
Wow.
mind telling people how old I am. So I
That is
have
amazing, actually.
yeah, so well, thank you. And so I've been a meditation teacher in right around now. It will be, I guess, my 51st anniversary or 52nd
Wow.
anniversary of being a meditation
Wow.
teacher. And maybe, and what I think is so interesting about the tradition that we both started out in, the transcendental meditation tradition, and the great master Maharishi Mahesh Yogi said that there were 3 stages of consciousness that everybody experiences. And remember, he would talk about
Yes.
how each one had a mental and a physical basis.
Yes.
Waking consciousness, where the mind is alert to the world and the body is also active, the heart is beating and the breath is, moving quickly. And then they're sleeping, where the mind is not alert to the world. If someone said fire, you might not jump up, and the body is at rest. So it's the opposite of waking. The heart rate slows down, the skin resistance lessens, the breath becomes softer. And then there's dreaming. And in dreaming, the mind is not alert to the world. If someone said fire, you probably wouldn't jump up. But at the same time, your heart could be pounding during dream state. Your breath could be during dream state. So it's a completely separate state of consciousness. And then Maharishi used to explain that when we learn to meditate, we add a 4th state of consciousness, which is transcendental consciousness, where the body, all the science, where we got all hooked up to electrodes and this and that, where they show that the body is in this very deep state of rest, even deeper than deep sleep in transcendental consciousness. And in transcendental consciousness, your mind is in a different state. It could be in that incredibly expanded state. It's infused with silence. It's a state that Maharishi used to refer to as restful alertness. The body is rested, but the mind is alert. If someone said fire, you would probably jump up more quickly than if you were in waking state. Waking state, someone says fire, you're like, fire, oh, fire. But even though you're in this deep state of rest, someone says fire, your mind is completely alert. It's a completely different state of consciousness. But then Maharishi went on to explain that there is another state of consciousness called cosmic consciousness. So you're asking me about my awakening experience.
Yes.
And what he says is that cosmic consciousness, that the longer you meditate, that the more that infinite silence and infinite expansion, that state where the body is rested, but the mind is fully alert, stays with you more and more and more. So even in the midst of dynamic activity, no matter what happens to you, you never lose the silence. So what I would say is that awakening usually doesn't happen like one day you're not awake and the next day you're awake, right? It happens by doing our spiritual practices regularly. And then we notice that we're not thrown so much by things that happen to us or out in the world, that silence never leaves. And as you continue to do your practice, then what happens is that silence is with you all the time. You know, I just went out to dinner with some of my godchildren, and they said to me, Auntie Deb, you never get upset. You never like get all tense and anxious. And I thought to myself, you know, I really don't. And it's not a mood making thing. It's not like, oh, I'm a meditator, so I won't get upset. It's just that the more you do your practices, the more that silence doesn't leave. Maharishi used to explain it like he said that when we react to things in life, it's not usually that we're reacting to what's happening at that moment. We're reacting because what's happening in that moment hits up upon some impression that maybe you know, somebody said something mean to us when we were a child, and then we meet somebody and they say something mean and we react all out of proportion, but it hit up against that childhood experience. But as we meditate, those samskaras, which is the Sanskrit word for impression, those samskaras from that deep rest disappear. The samskaras, just like deep sleep, our stresses disappear, but the deeper rest of meditation, those deep-rooted stress, that deep-rooted fatigue, those deep-rooted impressions leave and leave and leave. So somebody says something and it's like line on water. Remember Marisha used to
Yes,
say
I
that?
remember.
Line on stone. It's just, yeah, we heard it, but then the impression just leaves. And then eventually what Marisha used to teach us is not only does that silence never leave, but eventually the whole world takes on a celestial glow. And he called that God consciousness. And sometimes people, I'm sure some of your listeners have looked at another individual and they see an aura around them, a celestial aura, and they see that that person is the embodiment of God. And then as we continue to do our spiritual practices, then we can reach a state of what Maurice used to call unity consciousness. And again, probably everybody has had the experience of looking in deeply into somebody else's eyes or whatever the situation is, and they, not a mood making thing, but they actually have the experience that you and I are one, that you and I are just the expressions of that same consciousness. Maurice used to liken it to like the sap. Like if there's a rose and you broke it down and you broke it down and you broke it down, you know, the molecules and the atoms and the protons and electrons, neutrons and quarks, then at the basis, there's just the unmanifest. And every single one of us are just manifestations of that same unmanifest. So as we continue to do our spiritual practices, we can have that experience that Maharishi called unity consciousness, where we experience that you and I are one, that this table is made of that same underlying consciousness as you, as me. And again, it's not like, oh, you know, Tracy, you and I are one. That's sweet. You know, maybe we look in each other's eyes, but it's an actual experience that we're made from that same consciousness. But here's why I want to talk about my awakening experience. When I grew up with Marishi's knowledge, and God bless him, because he was my first teacher and got me on my path. Even my mother goes, thank God for the Maharishi. Because, you know, it was the 60s, and it was the drug culture, and my mother feels like Maharishi saved my life, and he probably did, because again, I was a child in the 60s. And, but what I thought from studying with Maharishi was that progression was linear. And I also thought that if I meditated twice a day, and sometimes you remember we would go on courses where we would meditate 8, 10, 12 hours a day, and we would be in silence for weeks at a time. And we felt like if we continued to do that, one day we'd wake up and be in cosmic consciousness. And then a few years later, we'd be in God consciousness. And a few years later, we'd be in unity consciousness, like linear. And then one day, somebody asked Maharishi, how many more of these courses do we have to do before we are in unity or even cosmic consciousness? And you remember what he said? He said, oh, you could be walking down the streets of New York and inhale the fumes of a bus as it passes by, and you can go into unity consciousness. And I'm like, say what? And then I realized that awakening was not linear. And I still deeply believe that meditation not only speeds the process, but makes your life more of an effortless flow. But it's not the only way to wake up. My Maharishi said you could inhale the fumes of a bus and you could wake up, right? It's not the only way. So, so that's it. So have I had an awakening experience? Sure, I have had an experience. I mean, sometimes you could look at a sunset and all of a sudden you feel one with the sun. You could look at a baby, you could look at a puppy, you could look at your beloved. You could just be sitting in meditation and you have an experience of oneness. But I believe, as Gurudev says, I have a human body. I'm not wasting it for the price of spinach. So I do believe that I can be permanently awakened in this lifetime, and I'm going for it. So that was a long answer to a short question.
That covered so much there. That was wonderful. All the 7 states of consciousness, all that beautiful wisdom from Maharishi. Thank you, Deborah. I think, what else can we talk about? That's like you just covered it all. So that was wonderful.
Well, in one of the things, I think that we have awakening experiences every time we have an epiphany, every time we have an aha, every time we have a flash of insight. We feel like, wow, where did that come from? It came from the universe. It came from the God of your understanding. It's a micro awakening experience. But the more we do our spiritual practices, the more we have those, synchronistic experiences. And it's kind of like, it's like a Venn diagram. It becomes, enlightenment, and it becomes more and more until the enlightenment Venn diagram and the U Venn diagram are one and the same.
Beautiful.
Right?
Right. Absolutely. And so when you look back on your life when you were younger and before you started to meditate, and now at 71, at a radiant 71, how do you feel like you have progressed? How have you awakened in your life?
Well, I actually had my first experience that I would call an awakening experience when I was 13. I think I've shared this with you before, but I'll share it with your audience. When I was I guess I must have been in 7th or 8th grade, and I was a very cool girl. I was never a mean girl, but I was cool. Okay. And at the school that I went to, Eastbury School, the cool girls during recess would sit on the certain picnic bench, out in the playground. And, it was like every girl's dream to be in the club with the cool girls. And I was never quite comfortable with being that exclusive, but it's kind of what you do in 7th and 8th grade. And then one day I was on the park bench, and 2 of the other girls in the club brought over another girl. And they said to her, and this girl was decidedly not a cool girl, and they said to her, guess what? We've decided that we are going to invite you into our club. And I remember looking at her face, and she lit up like Times Square on on Christmas. I mean, you would think we gave her a gold brick, the way her face just lit up. And then those 2 girls go, we're just kidding. We would never let you in the club. And I remember I had an experience in my little 13-year-old body that when this girl, we'll just call her Erica, when this girl's joy turn into this pain. I saw the world as a hologram. I
Oh.
saw the world as like a matrix. And
Mm.
I saw her pain radiating out from her heart chakra
Mm.
and radiating to every corner of creation. I saw her pain affecting everything, not only on
Wow.
our planet, but beyond. And I saw the whole of creation contract because of that one girl's pain. And I also saw her pain go back into those other two girls and multiply 1,000-fold. It was like darkness went
Wow.
into them and filled their bodies. And I'm watching this in my little 13-year-old experience. And I remember thinking, I will never, it makes me cry. I made a vow. I said, I will never do anything to hurt another human being for the rest of my life, because I saw what it did when you hurt another human being, not only to the world, but back to you. Have I been perfect? Well, no, but I'm aware that everything we do has an effect on the world. So that was my first experience of awakening.
Wow.
And has it changed my life? Absolutely. Because guess what? Selfishly, I don't want that darkness coming back to me. And likewise, when we do something kind, an act of kindness, an act of goodness, an act of love, an act of caring, that light radiates to the entire world and back to you when you do an act of kindness for somebody else. And, one of the other things, so yeah, that was a moment that I will always remember, because I guess you would call that a moment of awakening. But I also realized that there is a formula for having a life that is immersed in light, immersed in silence, immersed in goodness. And when I realized what it was, I founded this new body of knowledge besides my course, Yes to Success, and I called it the New Success Revolution. And I taught that there were 5 elements to, wait a second, we were together the first time.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I was helping you with your event. That's
My
right.
God,
That's
you were the
right.
one. It was you together for me. And here we are again.
Isn't that
Thank
amazing?
you.
Oh my gosh. Oh, it's my joy to have been there. I just saw it. It came out of you. We were teaching
Right.
that Yes to Success retreat. Remember, you were teaching that. I was assisting you with that. And then you said, I need to do whole new thing. I need to come up
Right.
with a whole new way of doing it. And it was just
And
coming right out of you.
we were living together at the time. It's NFL.
Isn't that
Oh my
amazing?
goodness.
I totally remember that. I totally remember that. And look what came
And
out of that.
I remember sharing it with you, and you were like,
Yes. Yes.
girl. So, well, I'm going to share the elements with everybody. How
Great.
perfect is that?
Wonderful.
So,
Thank
so
you. What
what
a
I
gift.
realized was that it wasn't just our spiritual practices if we want to live an awakened life, but the first element to living an awakened life is doing your spiritual practices. And I also believe that spiritual practices are no longer an option. And we do them for several reasons. One is our spiritual practices create a basis of silence so that we are unshakable even in the face of chaos. I remember Amaji, the hugging saint, said,
Yes.
we
I
must
love
cling
her.
to our spiritual practices
Yeah.
so that when the world shakes, we will remain unshakable.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
And spiritual practices are something that we do, and that we take ourselves out of daily life. And things like meditation, breath practices, drumming, ecstatic dancing, rosary, prayer, sacred fire ceremonies. I'm sure that other people have a lot of other things that they do, but it's when you stop for 10, 15, 20 minutes a day, an hour, however long it is, and you intentionally do a spiritual practice. In these practices create expansion of consciousness, they cultivate inner silence, they bring bliss to ourselves. I still meditate. I do my breath practice every day. I do my meditation every day. I do my yoga almost every day. But what we do is we create high vibration inside our beings. And also when we do these practices, when we do our meditation or our breath or our rosary, we are in the present moment. And the more we do them, that present moment awareness stays with us. And we spontaneously begin to live more in the present moment all the time. And another reason we do spiritual practices is because how we affect each other. We do spiritual practices not only to become unshakable ourselves, but that state of inner silence is reflected in what we radiate to the world, and we affect everyone around us. If we're peaceful on the inside, we radiate peace, we create an aura of peace, and that affects others and affects the world. Like so many people like, what can I do for the world? Well, do your own spiritual practices, because then we become a more uplifting presence and a more silent presence. You know, when people who are steeped in that silence, they walk into a room, that silence just permeates the room. And and it's also outside. Every word we speak, every action we take either increases or decreases peace on the planet. So the first element for living an awakened life is to pick a spiritual practice that creates inner silence and stick with it. Don't just think about doing it. Oh yeah, I'm a meditator because I meditate once a week at the YMCA. No. Every day we have to do our spiritual practices so that we dive into the silence and we come out. We dive into the silence and we come out. And the more we dive in, the more that silence is going to be with us, even in the midst of chaos in the world. So that's the first thing, to live in an awakened life. The second is to do energetic practices. And the difference between a spiritual practice and an energetic practice is that spiritual practices are deliberate practices that we take ourselves outside of our daily routine. An energetic practice is doing something part of your daily routine. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a fine line between the two. But energetic practices are things like rejoicing in other people's success instead of, oh, why are they successful? There's, speaking ill of people. Instead, that would not be a spiritual practice, an energetic practice. Looking for the good in others, looking for the silver lining, canceling your negative thoughts and saying the things that you want to happen in your life, having gratitude, saying thank you to the God of your understanding for everything that comes into your life, because it's either obviously good or it's clearing away some blocks so that the good can present itself. Treating everyone like the most important person in the world, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable. Those are all energetic practices. Beautiful. And the more we do those, again, the more awakened we become. Another reason why we do these energetic practices, there's this concept that I love to teach, and it's a concept from Kabbalah called tikkun. Yes. A tikkun is something that we came into this life to repair. All right. And we all have them. And what do I mean by that is, like, everybody has something that they're always working on. One of my big tikkuns is self-worth. One of my big tikkuns is, not feeling like I'm enough. One of my big tikkuns is speaking my truth. I think I'm going to die if I speak up, asking for what I want. This has been an ongoing thing. My parents used to not, they were great givers, but very bad receivers. And I grew up thinking, give, but very difficult to receive. So those are my tikkuns. Those are the things I came into this lifetime to repair. And I'm going to give you a visual of why it's important to repair those things. Okay.
Yes.
So here's the light of grace. Okay. Just like the sun shines on everybody the same, shines on if you're black, white, old, young, the sun shines on you. All right. Now you could block the sun by putting up an umbrella. You can block the sun by going into a, what do you call those things where you go underground, a bunker? You might die of vitamin D deficiency. But it's the same thing with the light of grace. The light of grace, if here's the light of grace, then here's you down here. Everything we want in life, including awakening, is right there for the taking. But because we're blocking the light of grace, we're not seeing those wonderful things that are just outside our reach. Why are we blocking the light of grace? Well, we block them with the light of grace with our actions. For me, what if I'm faced with a way to speak my truth and I don't do it? It blocks the light of grace for me. But if I'm faced with a way to speak my truth and I do it, a veil, this is in Kabbalah, which is the Jewish mystical text. When I do the hard thing, a veil is removed between me and the light of grace. And then I see, oh my gosh, there's my soulmate right outside my reach, or there's my money, or there's my success. We could do little ways to unblock the light of grace, letting somebody in traffic, even if you're in a hurry, holding the door for somebody, even when you're in a hurry, not taking credit when credit is not due, but everybody at a board meeting say, oh, Debra, that's a beautiful idea. And I say, well, actually, it's not my idea. That was Tracy's idea. Takes away a veil between you and the light of grace. So every moment we have a choice. Do we add a veil between us and the light of grace, or do we take one away? And ultimately, when all of the veils are gone between you and the light of grace, you are in light. You are completely in the light, or enlightened, or awake. Beautiful. So, and the other reason why we do those energetic practices is because when you allow that light of grace you remove all the veils and it's completely shining on you, it's also completely shining on the planet. The other way, you're blocking it from shining on the planet as well. Wow. So that's the second thing you could do for awakening. And you could do it every moment of every day. You have a choice, add a veil or remove a veil. And then another element to awakening is to live your Dharma. You know, like you doing this, these interviews is so dharmic for you. Dharma is the word, literally is translated as the way. You know, people usually use it as simultaneous or synonymously with your occupation. But Dharma is really not just about your occupation, but the purpose for which you were put on this earth and how you're going to make use of your God-given talents. So you, Tracy, you're such a good interviewer. I've seen you do it before. You are an incredible videographer. You're so creative with music. You're so creative putting together things like you're doing right now. That's why when you helped me with my event that I put on, why it was so awesome, because you're so good at putting on events. Those are all your Dharma. It's dharmic for you. It's the DNA you're coded with. I'm not coded with, all of the talents that you have. I can't make a video. I can't pick. I mean, you're so, anyway, you have a gazillion talents. You're also the best cook in the world. And you make the best popcorn with ghee, but that's another story.
Yay.
But the DNA we're coded with to expand our fulfillment in life. So it's doing what makes your heart sing. When we're not using our God-given talents, there's an emptiness in our own lives, and it creates chaos on the subtle level of the creation. If you're a musician and you're not making music, if you have magic hands and you're not a healer or a body worker, if you, in the Rig Veda, it says when the dancers are dancing and the writers are writing and the quilters are quilting, actually, it says in the Rig Veda, when Papa is the physician and Mama throws the corn upon the grinding stone, a little sexist, but it's saying that when we're each doing what we were put on earth to do, the world's going to be in balance, and the world will be in order when everyone is living their dharma. So again, we're also, you've heard this expression, attitudes are contagious, as years worth catching. Vibrations, you go into a room where everybody's low vibration, it brings your vibration down. You go into a room where people are vibrating on high vibration, it brings your vibration up. And when we're living our dharma, it uplifts not only ourselves, but everybody when we're living our dharma.
Beautiful.
So it spreads light to the whole world, right?
Wow, beautiful. And I love to think of it as well as living what your soul came to do, living your soul purpose. So listening
Right.
more to your soul. What did my soul want to experience through this human incarnation? And when we listen to that and we just would do that, then we're in line with what we honestly came here to do, what our soul came here to do. And so that has to be, this beautiful experience of living that fulfillment of what you came to do. So,
Beautiful.
yes.
And also a lot of people say, oh, well, I know what I want to do, but I don't have the this or the that. I love that quote from Emerson, where Emerson says, there is nothing capricious in nature, like tricky in nature. Emerson says, the implanting of a desire indicates that its
Mhm.
gratification is in the
Yes.
constitution of the creature that feels it. I don't have a dharma to climb Mount Everest. I don't want to climb to the end of my driveway to put the garbage out. It's like, I don't have a dharma to, play my violin at Carnegie Hall. I am so not musically talented that it's not even funny. But people who have those gifts, you were given those gifts to use them. So living your dharma
Yes.
is living your truth, and that's your own
Yes.
awakening.
And sometimes, we go through life and we find ourselves in different jobs and doing things. Oh, I don't really like this right now. What am I doing this for? And then you find out years later, oh, you know what? I learned a skill there that was very important for my life. And now I'm using it. So everything we go through in our life is important. We're learning valuable lessons, learning valuable skills. And then it all kind of gets put together, as you move on with your life. So everything is important that you're going through. Pay attention. Pay attention to what you're doing. Pay attention to what you're learning, because you're going to use that in your life in different ways. So it's not that you have to be doing the job that you absolutely love, and it's not about that. It's paying attention to what you're doing now, learning everything you can along the way. That is the Dharma.
Absolutely. I always tell this story about how I was full-time teaching meditation. We lived in Fairfield, Iowa
Yes,
together
that's
too,
right.
and which is a meditation community. And then, and I was the director of admissions at Maharishi International University. And
Yes.
then I realized that I needed to make some money, and I moved to LA in order to make some money so I could go back and live in Fairfield, because there weren't that many opportunities to make a lot of money. And I wanted to just work full time for the TM movement. And that expression, we make plans and God laughs. And I went and I did something that was like totally not dharmic for me, selling investments. I never sold one, even though I worked there for a long time. Well, that's not true. I sold them to my dad because he felt sorry for me. But this thing, we make plans and God laughs. Well, I didn't go there to sell investments. I thought I did. But then one day somebody, one of my coworkers invited me to an event at the Learning Annex. And the guy there was talking about the law of attraction, and he was talking about all of the things that I now teach in Yes to Success. So obviously, there's a higher consciousness that knows what is best for you, for your own dharma, for your own awakening,
Yes.
that has that 35,000 foot view. And also, I love that quote from the Course in Miracles that goes, don't be concerned with your own readiness, just be consistently aware of mine. And which is so beautiful, because all you have to do is take steps, in the right direction, and then God nature just takes over.
Yes. Yes, and um, that event that you went to there then led you to start your Yes to Success courses, and look at you now, still doing them 40 years later and refining them and bringing them out, and look at the thousands of people that you've taught around the world these courses. So, it's just amazing where that led you to. Just amazing. Wonderful.
Yes, yes. Well, I
And
have one other.
yes.
No, you were going
Oh,
to ask a
please.
question. I just remembered one other awakening experience I had.
Yes.
Talking about Yes to Success. It made me remember that one where one of my near death experiences.
Yes. I wanted to ask
And
you about that. Yes.
yeah, because in Yes to Success for all of these years, I taught that our minds create our reality. And I teach people that the power of our words, even the Bible, it says, thou shalt decree a thing and it shall be added unto you. Right. And it doesn't say in the Bible, thou shalt decree a thing. And who knows, it might be added unto you. No, thou shalt decree a thing and it shall be added unto you. And I
Wow.
taught that from the time I started teaching Yes to Success back in, 1980, 1981. Again, I came out to LA, thought I was going to make money and go back to Fairfield. And then I heard this amazing knowledge at the Learning Annex and never went back. Well, I did go back to Fairfield decades later, but I started my Yes to Success seminar in teaching this concept that thou shalt decree a thing. So for all those decades, I taught that your word is your wand, thou shalt decree a thing. And then one day in 2014, I think it was, maybe 2015, I was in bed. I was sick. And usually when I get sick, I get a little sore throat, something. I knock it right out, take some golden seal, some echinacea, some electrolytes, and doesn't take hold of me. I never get sick. And but this day I had a little sore throaty thing, and then the next day it was worse, even though I did my routine. And the next day it was even worse, and then worse, and then worse. And by Saturday, I was lying in bed and I was living alone. I thought I could die here and nobody would know. So I did whatever any intelligent person would do. I called my favorite healer and I said, I think I'm going to die. Can you help me? And he said, yes, but you have to promise that you do exactly what I tell you to do. So I said, anything. And he said, call 911 immediately. So I
Wow.
couldn't even call 911 because I was fading. And so he had to call 911. And I don't know how many minutes later, they had to like break in because I was really fading. And I remember the paramedic asked me what hospital I wanted to go to. And I said, Evanston, and whispered, I said, Evanston. And they took my vitals and my blood pressure was like 52/28, which is, as they say, incompatible with life. And they were afraid that, right, nice way to say it. And they were afraid that they wouldn't make it the 11 minutes to Evanston Hospital. So they took me to a small hospital around the corner. And I went into the emergency room and it did not look good. And they started, hooking me up to every monitor, every orifice had some kind of tube, da, da, da. And I started dying. And I remember my former husband, we were separated at the time, but my healer had called Fred and he showed up at the hospital. And all of a sudden I noticed that when my eyes were open, I could see that everybody was rushing around trying to save my life. And when my eyes were closed, I could see that everybody was rushing around trying to save my life. But I also saw that there is this celestial, this divine light that was actually in charge. It was moving everybody's hands. It was directing. Like I remember when the one of the nurses went to hang up an IV bag and she fumbled it and dropped it on the gurney, and everybody like shot her daggers, like, you clumsy. But I saw that she wasn't in charge, that the light made her do it. because when she bent down to pick it up, her head moved away from a monitor, and somebody else saw the monitor and they ran to the other side of the room and made an adjustment that saved my life.
Wow.
And I saw in that place between life and death that everything that happens is just like the cogs of a fine-tuned watch, that everything fits into everything else. And, you know, this expression, there are no mistakes in the universe. I saw with my own eyes that there are no mistakes, that everything is guided by a divine light. And then what happened was that, again, it did not look like I was going to live. And I looked over, and my husband, he was still my best friend, my husband I was separated with, he had like this tear running down his cheek. And I remember the nurse going over and putting her hand on his shoulder and saying, "Don't worry, she's going to be fine."
Oh.
And I saw the words "she's going to be fine" come out of her mouth, accompanied by this. It wasn't like I saw the words "she is going to be fine," but it was like the impulse of the words came out of her mouth, went into my body, and gave me all of my strength back. They brought me back to life. The word, and you know, we have dominion over life and death. I saw it. Her words brought me back to life. She's going to be fine. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness. Then the doctor comes in, looks at the monitors, and says in this really intense voice, "Get that blood pressure up or we are going to lose her." And when he said we're going to lose her, I saw the words come out of his mouth, and they were like brown, gray gunk. They even smelled like a swamp in that place between life and death. And when he said we're going to lose her, they went into my body and they took away my strength. And at that moment, I said to God, okay, I get it. Everything that I've been teaching for the last few decades is true. Thou shalt decree a thing, and it shall be added unto you. Our word does have dominion over life and death. And I said to God, let me live. And I promise that I will teach everybody that I can how powerful their words are. And I also made a promise that I will never, ever say anything that I don't want to happen. Because, you know, Trace, we all say things like about our kids, you know, like, oh, well, you don't, because you're such a good mom. But, you know, I would say things about my kids like, oh, Daniel, if he blah, 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 blah. And oh, Deanna, she blah. And I realized that when I would say those things about them, it would make them be that way. So I made the promise that I would never say those things again. I would only say what I wanted to be true in my kid's life. So let's say it was like, Daniel's irresponsible. That isn't it. So I could say that. I would say, you know, Daniel, day after day, he's becoming more and more responsible. I don't say, oh, Daniel's the most responsible person in the world, because I can't believe that. But I could say every day he's becoming more and more responsible. And at that moment, because of that experience, I realized that we do have dominion, and that we even have dominion over life and death. So that was an awakening moment for me.
How did that
And the
change
good
your
news
life?
is,
Sorry, go
well,
ahead.
one thing is I lived.
Yes.
I did live. That's the good news. Well, it's because, I mean, I knew I'm not a negative person anyway. And, you know, you have to find yourself being negative, and then I say cancel, and then I replace the statement with something that I do want. But I became even more, how that changed my life is I became more aware. And I think that the other thing is that the more we do these things that bring grace into our lives, first we have to correct ourselves, and then it becomes spontaneous. Like when I went out with my godchildren, they go, Auntie Deb, you never are mean. You're never negative. You always look at the bright side. Well, yeah, because I've been teaching Yes to Success for 43 years. So I want to be the teacher who lives the teaching. But, you know, at first it's a little bit hard, like going through molasses. but then it becomes easier and easier and easier. And now I don't even have to think about it anymore. I'll tell you one other, I know I'm full of stories, but I'll tell you one other story, which is very funny because it's a story about a friend who I happen to be going out to dinner with tonight. One of my friends, since we were 7, she had one of those pools when we were little tiny girls. It was an above ground pool. You know, I didn't live in a neighborhood where people had built-in pools, but she had one of those above ground pools. And for her birthday was September 7th, and we would always have pool parties in her backyard. And her mom would do this thing where all of the little tiny girls, we would stand in her pool. It's probably, I don't know, maybe 3 feet high, but we would stand with our backs against the inside of the pool. And then her mom would say, now start walking to your right. And it was hard for us because the water was up to here on us, right? And then we'd walk and we walk and then it became easier and easier and easier and easier. And then her mom would say, let go. And then we would float. And then that current would just take us with, right? Because we'd created that current. And I say with all of these things, you know, sometimes we want to be negative. Sometimes we don't want to hold the door for somebody. Sometimes we want to add a veil. But you know what? The more you do it, it's hard to begin with. You have a choice at every moment. Do that thing. And then eventually the grace of God, the God of your understanding, will just take you. And then obstacles disappear. I mean, we each have our karma. We each have these things that we came in, our cocoons, but I'm telling you, it's your choice at every moment. And eventually you just can float through life. And that doesn't mean that things don't, that, stuff happens, but it's not what happens to you. It's your reaction to what happens to you. And if you have a reaction that brings in the light, that removes the veil, eventually your life becomes an effortless flow.
Beautiful.
And
beautiful.
That's my belief, and I'm sticking to it.
Wow. Amazing stories. Amazing stories. And so now at 71, when you look back on your life, what do you feel like your purpose was in this life? What did you feel like you went through all of those things in your life for? Why are you here?
Awakening. I am here for my adventure in awakening. And again, those things, doing the energetic practices, doing the spiritual practices, living the Dharma, of course, being love. We have a choice at every moment. And I think we have to do the scary thing. I think we have to move outside our comfort zone. I think that God rewards the courageous. And I think everybody is here to live an awakened life. We are, as we started out, the very first thing you said, we are spiritual beings in a human body. Let's not waste this and give it up, give a bag of gold and sell it for the price of a bag of spinach. So all of those things are just, and the other thing is, when you have an experience that is quote unquote bad, and we all have those things. People have died. There have been illnesses. There have been disappointments. We've had divorce. I've had a couple myself. And again, it's not what happens. It's how you react to what happens. And I really believe that the universe has my back. And I believe that everything that happens is for my higher good. I believe that when I want something and I don't get it, it's because, when you ask God for something, God will give you only one of 3 answers. Yes, here it is. Not yet. Be patient. Or I love you too much to give you that thing. There's something better on its way. So I think that because I know these things, I could say, thank you, God, even when I'm disappointed, even when something happens to me that doesn't appear to be great. But again, eventually, I think that I'm here to live an awakened life and spontaneously see the perfection without even trying to. at the beginning, again, it's like pushing through that water when you're a little, when the water's up to your chest, but eventually we're here to float.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so what is your idea of fully awakened? So when we talk about unity consciousness, what would you like to be experiencing before you leave this planet in this body? What would you feel like, finally I made it, I did it, I did it in this life? What would be that experience for you?
I will know that, see, I will know that I am there when I could love everybody.
Beautiful.
I'm not there. No, I look at some, for example, political figures, and I do not spontaneously have love, but I'm working on it because I know that everyone is a child of God. I know that some people just have had hurts from the time that the rejections and they're scarred from their childhood, which makes them do crazy things. But I also think that those people, the most objectionable people, are our biggest cocoons, but they're our biggest gifts. Because when I could look at some of those people and I could spontaneously see the hurt child, I could see the beautiful heart that's under all of those layers. I could, instead of getting tweaked, I could laugh and love. Then I'll know that I'm there. But in the meantime, I have to do it intentionally. In the meantime, I have to stop and breathe and remind myself that everybody is a child of God. You know what I do? I do this thing called 3 good things. When I see somebody and I want to, like, oh, and that doesn't mean that we don't work for causes. That doesn't mean that we don't work for social justice. We don't champion causes that we think, but we don't have to hate those people who, I mean, they're but for the grace of God. If I didn't live in in Chicago, which is a very liberal place, and my parents were incredibly liberal, and my parents marched for social justice, and that's how I was brought up. So I think that that's the right way to be. But if I was born somewhere else, I would be just as convinced that other ways were the right way to be. And when I could love those people who believe that the other way is the right way to be, and not just the people who believe what I believe, that is what I'm striving for, because that is when I'll feel that I'm
Beautiful.
really awake. And people say, oh, Debra, you have so much integrity. Yeah, I try, but I got a long way to go.
Beautiful. 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 Wow. Oh my gosh. So much wisdom came out today. So much knowledge came out today, Debra. And are there any last tidbits of wisdom that you would like to share with people today before you go?
Yes. And that is this. When I said I have a long way to go, cancel. I am getting better and
There you
better
go.
every day. And
Beautiful.
soon I will be able to spontaneously see the God in everyone without having to
Beautiful.
stop and reminding myself. And we're all works in progress. And I think that the last thing that I would say is, they say that you are the composite of the 5 people who you spend the most time with. Well, you're so lucky you have Tom, who's another saint, right? So you're the composite of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And some people say, Stuart Emery and I can't remember who his co-author was for the book, Who's in Your Room, and you only want those people in your room who uplift you and all of that. But I think that the people who are the most objectionable are the greatest gifts, because if everybody was just easy, then what incentive would we have to do the hard work? And I believe that doing that hard work is what's going to bring us to enlightenment. So I would say that whenever we're faced with one of those big challenges or big cocoons or objectionable people, just look at them and they have a sign across their forehead that says, "Hello, I'm your cocoon." And if you face it and you come out on the other side, that's where the arms of the angels are waiting to catch you.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Well, I see you as a beautiful angel on earth, Deborah. You have inspired and helped so many people in the world. And I know you've inspired me in so many ways. I can't even express how much you've uplifted and inspired my life over the years. And I'm just so grateful to have had this conversation with you. I think so much juicy wisdom came out today. I think people are going to be so just uplifted and awakened by all the things that you shared today. So we're so grateful that you're here. So grateful that you're
Well,
here. Thank you so much.
thank you. And I just want to say likewise, you are such an inspiration in my life. When I think about purely good people, you are at the top of my
Oh,
list. So
Deborah.
thank you for doing this and spreading your beautiful light and bringing on people who can add a little bit more ways that we could have an adventure in awakening. Okay.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Deborah. Let's do this again soon. Thank you.
Anything for you, my dear. Love you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Mwah. Thank you, Deborah. For more information about Debra Poneman, go to her website, yestosuccess.com, and there you will also be able to receive her acclaimed ebook, The 5 Secrets to a Life of True Success. Thank you for joining us for the Adventures in Awakening show. I'm Tracaya Spring, and wishing you a glorious day.